As an EDS and co-specialist, something I've seen over and over again in my practice is a patient presenting with symptoms that are very clearly driven by inflammation, but their initial labs come back completely normal. But just because they have normal labs doesn't mean they don't have inflammation. What it really means is that the type of inflammation the patient is experiencing just doesn't show up in the typically tested markers. Things like white blood cell counts, ESR, CRP, ferritin. This is because there are actually two major pathways for inflammation in the body. And most labs typically only test for one of those pathways, known as the classical inflammation pathway. Classical inflammation typically involves mediators or proteins that are created in the liver and then spit out into the bloodstream, where they can be easily and reliably measured on a blood test. On the other hand, the second pathway, called the neurogenic inflammation pathway, involves mediators that are created in or around the nerves rather than the bloodstream. This primarily includes proteins like CGRP, Substance P, and the hundreds of mediators that are created by mast cells, including histamine and other cytokines. These mediators are much more difficult to test for because they tend to remain around the tissue surrounding the nerves and they have very short half-lives, which essentially means they can't easily be detected on a blood draw because we can only measure the active mediators that are in the bloodstream at the time of the blood draw. Notably, neurogenic inflammation is the primary pathway involved in chronic conditions like migraines, MCAS, CRPS, fibromyalgia, and many other poorly understood chronic conditions. So, having normal inflammatory labs doesn't mean that you don't have inflammation. It just means that your type of inflammation might be hiding somewhere outside the bloodstream, where it's a lot harder to detect on a typical lab test.